All right, so today we're going to talk about UX for business resilience. Um, we really wanted to bring this to companies so that they can understand that user experience is something that can come into every level of an organization, and it's really important for innovation. And a big part of that is design thinking. UX and design thinking work side by side. So my name is Cindy Brummer, and the company that I represent is Standard Beagle. And I'm joined today with Amanda White, one of our UX designers. We've been doing this since, gosh, a long time. I've been doing it a long time before it was even called UX. But Standard Beagle itself was established in 2012, and we really practice what we preach. We try to make sure that design thinking is part of everything that we do. That being said, in these times, we have done some quick pivots and not always been able to do the full UX process. But as long as we're going through some of the basics in terms of understanding, defining what we need to do, ideating on it, those are all pieces that you can bring into the business. So today what we're going to talk through is what is UX, what is design thinking, how does this apply, even when you don't have UX designers? And especially true, like not every company has UX designers. There are some that have large teams of them, some that just maybe have one or two, and many companies that don't have UX designers. But the thing is that you don't need a UX designer in order to implement these techniques. And we're going to talk through the techniques for implementation, and then also leave time for questions if there are any. All right, so Amanda and I are going to kind of trade off on some of these different slides, but essentially what we wanted to bring up with the beginning of this talk is how do we approach a problem? How can we rethink how we approach a problem? And a famous example is back, it looks like from the 1940s, there was a truck that hit the bottom of a bridge. And it's funny, when you do an internet search, this, this type of view happens quite often. But at this time, nobody could figure out what to do, how to free the truck from the bridge. They were thinking about actually cutting off the top of the truck when famously a child walked up and looked at the issue and thought, well, what if we just let the air out of the tires? And that's a prime example of looking at a problem a different way and thinking through those things. What about you, Amanda?
Yeah, I think it's really important that sometimes the most obvious solution isn't the right one, and you really need to explore all the different ways that you can tackle a problem, before you find the right solution.
All right, so what is UX? Amanda, what is the definition of UX for you when you think about it?
So I think UX, obviously it stands for, well, not everyone may know this, but it stands for user experience. And user experience means thinking about the user first and really bringing in empathy to your process. So instead of just solving a problem, you're considering what your user or your customer wants and then solving the problem in a way that suits them. And sometimes that means, not doing things the way the stakeholders or the way, key people in your company think it should be done. It's in a way that best suits the user.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it does work in conjunction with design thinking. They work almost in parallel, if not together, in a lot of ways. A lot of times user experience is applied to a digital solution, but it doesn't have to be. And in fact, design thinking is intended to work throughout an organization and to be able to address any problem. Here's what UX is not. It's not just creating a visual look and feel, although that can be part of it. UX designers do this a lot, but it's not just adding some color to make a pretty brochure. What it is really thinking through the entire experience of the person who's going to be interacting with your company, be it through a digital tool, maybe an e-commerce storefront, maybe in an actual storefront like a restaurant. Any way that they interact with the company, that is the user's experience, and that's what user experience design is all about. It's often, something that we think of in terms of just the digital experience, like I mentioned, but it's also very key to understand that it's human-centered. User experience is not about the company, it's about the humans who are using the product and service. Now, it's one of those things that you need to think of in terms of, the business is very important. So we're not throwing out the needs of the business at all. What we're doing is looking at the needs of the business, looking at the needs of the user, and looking at the technology stack and thinking through how we can center it based on all of those things and find that sweet spot in the center. Design thinking works in conjunction with it. It is pretty much a 5-phase approach to creative problem solving. It's also human-centered, which is why it works really well as a methodology that can be incorporated into user experience design. But it's not just for designers. And that's what's really exciting about it, is that we can apply it across the board. And that's why we think it's so important for businesses to be able to embrace design thinking so that they can innovate and they can really tap into the talent and the knowledge that is in workers across the board, from the frontline employees all the way up into the C-suite. Did you have anything to add to that, Amanda?
Yeah, so I think a great way to look at design thinking is it's basically a method for creating innovative solutions. And it really helps teams come together to find solutions that benefit everyone. And it's a great way to kind of break down really complex problems into more actionable tasks. And Cindy's right. I mean, anyone can do it. It's not just for designers. It's more, think of it more of just a way of breaking down complex problems with a team.
Yeah, very true. I mentioned that there are 5 phases. We call them the 5 pillars of design thinking. And I really want to go through and at least give everybody an option or an opportunity to see what those 5 pillars are, because this is really what's key in understanding it. Curiosity. You need to lean in and be curious about what is going on. How do I understand? If you don't have curiosity, in order to kind of think about, you can't think about things a different way. And I like to think of it as curiosity with the cat, because curiosity often kills. We say curiosity kills the cat, except that we really need to be curious. And I feel like that phrase actually discourages people from feeling curious, but that is like one of the key points in order to do successful design thinking. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I think oftentimes if you try to solve a problem and your mindset is too rigid, you won't be able to find as creative or as good a solution. So you really have to be curious in solving a problem and really think through, like, you know, what's the issue here? Is there an underlying issue? Is the issue more blatant? And you have to do a little digging, and that requires curiosity.
Yeah, and definitely being open to solving problems unconventionally. You, especially in these times, this is the time to really think through what are all the options and how can I solve it? Because some of the traditional methods of solving problems aren't available. So I don't think anybody foresaw that restaurants would have to shut down completely. And they're having to come up with some very, very innovative ways in order to stay in business, at least partially, so that there's not a complete shutdown. I loved reading the articles that came out early this week about how HEB is supporting local restaurants by the ones that are able to pack food that can be put into the HEB stores. That's completely thinking about the restaurant concept very differently. Drive-through margaritas. That requires a law change, obviously, but people are thinking through these things in a very unconventional way. I know that we've seen some other examples of unconventional problem solving, haven't you, Amanda? Yeah.
Sure,
Um,
I think it's happening in a bunch of different ways. I've seen a lot of it happening more so in like the restaurant industry, just because they have been so shut down. Um, and I feel like, yeah, that now that HEB is offering those services to help the small businesses, I mean, that's fantastic. And that's something that hasn't been done before.
yeah, and I was on a call this morning where we were talking with Peter Bay, the music director of the Austin Symphony, and he was talking about how they're trying to rethink how they deliver music. Obviously the most preferable is to be in a music hall where you're presenting it to a whole audience, but that's not available right now. So they're thinking through, how can we do streaming concerts, maybe from an individual musician's living room? How can we sync it up so that everybody could play together? The Austin Opera is offering indie concerts every Friday. They're releasing them. That they were able to do. So I think everybody's having to think on their feet and be go. I hate the phrase outside the box, but it is outside the box in a lot of ways. Empathy. Amanda, you do a good job of explaining empathy. What is empathy?
So I think empathy is really the nitty gritty of it, is just putting yourself into someone else's shoes. So when you are trying to empathize with someone, sometimes your mental constraints and your experiences limit you from being able to really understand what the other person is going through. So empathy is essentially just trying to identify with another person as well as you can by discovering like the key emotion that they're feeling, and then comparing it to a time where you felt that emotion, whether it's frustration or anger or, maybe feeling stupid. And I think that's the key part of empathy. It's just identifying with someone else and understanding what they're going through.
Yeah, and I think in these times, it's even more important too, because we're all going through really tough times. We're all feeling different levels of emotion, and it's easy to get kind of stuck in ourselves and how we're feeling. And I think that the companies that are able to place themselves in the shoes of their customers and really tap into what they're feeling, they're the ones that are going to be able to offer different solutions that really meet those needs. Everybody's in a bad place now, or at least struggling in some way, shape, or form. So empathy is going to be really key. Bringing multiple people to the table is also really key as part of the design thinking process. What this means is not just having you and maybe your best friend sit down and ideate on ideas. You need to bring in multiple perspectives. It might have to do with multiple perspectives from across the company in terms of ethnicity, everybody having different backgrounds. It might have to do with education level. I think that this is a really key point in terms of bringing in people from everywhere, not just the C-suite, but understanding what people in different departments are thinking, understanding, maybe somebody that has been dealing with customers, on the front line. What are they hearing from customers? Those different perspectives are going to be really key as part of the design thinking process. And then quickly making things real. I love this picture. So I don't know, have you ever worked in a situation, Amanda, where, you haven't been able to actually try things out, or maybe you have tried things out and it made all the difference and you didn't realize it?
Yeah, I think sometimes, when you don't have a lot of budget, even if you just make a paper prototype and test it with a few people, just to get like some sort of tangible feedback, I mean, that's helpful. And to me, quickly making things real means, I mean, if all you have time to do is to sketch something out on paper and to shoot your idea with some people, or if, maybe if you have a little more budget, you can make like an interactive prototype, or even just calling a few people on the phone and being like, hey, let's walk through this and you can tell me your thought, is just quick, dirty, whatever is easy for you.
Yeah, I agree. And the key here is, like you said, quick and dirty. It's rapid. Like, you want to fail fast. And you need to have that mentality that you're not going to be perfect when you roll this out the door to try it out. Now, are you going to roll it out to every single customer? Maybe not. Hopefully not. Hopefully you're testing it on a small group. But the idea is you want to see if it's going to fail or succeed. I mean, the idea is that you're going to win if you're going in with that mindset of, what can I try and is this going to work or not? And here's the thing. We went through all these pillars, and you do not need to be a designer to do these. Now, does it help? Absolutely. It helps to have that designer mindset. It does help to have designers on your staff that can help facilitate this process, or an outside consulting firm. But you don't have to have this, and that's why we're talking through this today. Design thinking takes, takes time to kind of practice and get down, but the idea is you want to take those steps now and try to get everybody invested and participating in it. So let's actually walk through how to bring design thinking to your office. Say you don't have any UX designers or any designers for that matter. How can you get everybody bought in and participating? All right, so the first step is that you want to start with, what are you doing, right? You need to ask questions. And those questions can include all sorts of things. How are, like, you just need to ask around, like, what am I trying to solve, right? Like, you know, if you're a company that has seen a downturn in clients, or maybe clients are calling you panicked, you know, you want to look through, like, what are the global issues that are affecting our business right now? What are we doing that's no longer appropriate for business now? What would happen if we didn't do anything? What is the trajectory? You know, as we're forecasting out, if nothing changed, what's going to happen? What's worth keeping? You know, what are we doing now that's worth keeping? So you really want to think through all sorts of questions, and I kind of jumped ahead, but are there any other questions on the list that they might want to start thinking of, Amanda?
Yeah, I think it's also important here to make sure you're thinking through things that haven't worked in the past, and maybe avoiding those things, or maybe they didn't work in the past and it might be a good thing to try now because the circumstances have changed. So I think, you know, kind of like bringing all of your ideas to the table, identifying the goals and the problems, and just figuring out like what needs to be done, and then you can start brainstorming from that point.
Yeah, and I know that, like, looking at these questions, a lot of people go, well, duh, that sounds really obvious. But the idea is that you want to start your creative thinking process from somewhere. And you want to keep looking back at these questions throughout the process, because sometimes your initial response might change, just like you noted. Like, it might have been different from 6 months ago. In 2 weeks, everything could change. So I think that it's important to think about that. Next, you have to bring the right mindset, and this really comes back to that curiosity that we talked about earlier. Um, you have to think through, like, what can I do to get everybody enthused about this? You might be bringing something that's completely foreign, and you're going to have a lot of people going, you know, what are you even talking about? And even in the best of times, it might be a hard sell. So it's important for you to model that mindset of curiosity. And you also want to listen and model that as well. Be a listener, a collaborator. Make sure that everyone is heard. All those diverse perspectives in the room, chances are at least one, if not more, are going to be a little distrustful that they're actually going to be heard. So they need to see that you're listening to them, and you want to hear their words and not shutting them down. The next thing you want to do is you want to guide. You don't want to be a strong influencer. And I think Amanda could actually agree with me when I say that I'm a big personality, and I tend to be a huge influencer just in our small group discussions. Um, and it's really important to recognize that in yourself and step back, guide the discussion rather than put your stamp of approval and get everybody to go the same way as you. I don't know if you want to add to that, Amanda.
Yeah, so, you know, sometimes when people who are really outspoken are in a meeting with me, it's really easy for me to participate in like groupthink where I'm like, okay, sure, that sounds like a good idea, because that's not how I think. Like, I need, you know, a little bit of quiet time to think things over, or I might even need to sleep on it before I get some really good ideas. And I think it's important to consider, you know, everyone has their own way of problem solving. And just because, you know, you like to do things one way doesn't mean, you know, you just have to be really mindful of how other people might solve problems, and make sure that their voice is heard, or else it's not going to be as effective if it's just 2 people leading the group or 3 people leading the group. You really want everyone to be involved.
Yeah, and we'll talk through some specific techniques on how to facilitate that because it's not always getting in a room and having a bunch of people talk. In fact, that's probably one of the worst ways to foster that.
Mm.
But another thing is keeping that positive attitude. I know that when Amanda and I teach boot camp students, we have to keep a positive attitude because a lot of times these things are frustrating for those students and they're going to be frustrating for your employees. These are going to be a little bit wacky and out of the norm for them, and they're going to feel uncomfortable. So by you modeling that positive attitude, they're going to feel a lot more comfortable and a lot more open to being able to try things out. One thing I want to mention is that sometimes you need to record what's going on. Make sure you record those sessions so you can look back at them later. Taking notes is great. You're not always going to remember everything, and there might be an idea that came out in the group that nobody recorded. So make sure that you've maybe got a video session going where you can record all the ideas in some way, shape, or form. And then, like I mentioned, make sure that you have someone taking notes. They might be someone completely outside of this discussion that isn't supposed to be part of it. Or maybe just everybody's taking notes and you look at all of the notes later. I think that's really important. Did I miss anything in terms of their mindset?
I don't think so. I mean, I do think it's important to add that just if you are like the business leader and you're kind of uh, guiding this brainstorm discussion, seek to link people's ideas and explore all of the ideas. And doing this really increases like a broad understanding of what the ideas are. So don't be the facilitator, link the different ideas together and explore everything. There's no right or wrong here.
That's great. Yeah. Now, when you get that diverse perspective group together, it's important to be looking for certain things. You want to make sure that you have the right team. Um, if you're diverse, they're probably going to have a variety of different perspectives, and you might have that person that kind of brings a lot of negativity to the table, maybe somebody that's always the yes man. You want to be really careful about who you include. You don't want everybody to say yes, but then again, you don't want someone to come in and go, well, that's a dumb idea. You want to make sure that you're thinking about who can come and bring like a voice, and it might be the quietest person in your company. So you even consider those frontline employees. Sometimes they have some great innovative solutions that you've never thought of. When we have company meetings, we always include our intern. She brings a totally different perspective from outside the company that is just gold. I mean, it's golden to have that perspective. So make sure you're thinking in terms of who can I include that's going to bring a great voice. It could be across generations. Your Gen Z intern, your millennial team, your Gen X team, your Boomer team. They should all be working together in conjunction. Anything to add to the assembling the right team?
Yeah, I think it's really important to emphasize here that you need a team with diverse sets of perspectives and areas of expertise because someone in HR might have a totally different viewpoint than someone who's in sales. So you really need, a couple people from each team from varying backgrounds, from varying age ranges, just to really complete your team.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. All right, so now that you've got the right team together, you have the right mindset, you've started asking questions, now you can start that design thinking process. And again, the magic number is 5. 5 phases, 5 pillars. So the first phase of design thinking is your research phase. Wah, wah, wah. Everybody's like, oh, research, really? Can't we just start coming up with ideas? No, really need to research. Now, in this environment, maybe you need to make some fast changes. This does not mean it needs to stretch on months and months. It does not mean that you need a special consultant to come in. You really need to do some just deep thinking and look at everything that you have. You might have prior surveys. You might have prior focus groups that you can look to. And you can look at all of the data about your customers that is happening right now. Maybe it's just Google Analytics that you can look at. So bring everything you already know about your customer and the market environment to the table when you research. The next thing is, what are your competitors doing? And Amanda and I actually work together often on competitive research and looking at the different competitors. And this can be a challenge, right? When you're dealing with a saturated market and a whole lot of competitors. So what do you think, what would be some of your tips for them in terms of looking at what competitors are doing? How do you look at that for our clients?
So I think it's really important to create a SWOT analysis. So SWOT stands for strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And I think the most important thing here is to really see, what are your competitors doing well? Where are they lacking? What are threats to their organization? And also, where are opportunities for them to improve? And that could be an area where you can improve your company to fill that gap.
Yeah, and it's important, I think, if you're going to do a SWOT on the competitors, to do a SWOT on yourself too.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, you can do SWOTs often. And I have a friend who does SWOTs on her company on a yearly basis, just so she can understand what's happening in the market. So now is a perfect time to do that as well. And then the next thing you want to do is, what are your customers feeling? And you don't need to do super fancy, super long research for this. You can go around and ask the people in your company, like, what are the customers saying when they're calling in? Your sales team, your maybe you have front desk people that have been fielding calls. Whoever it is that's talking to customers, that is where you should be tapping into to find out how your customers are feeling. Or maybe you have a list of customers that you can call and check in with them. Hey, this is so and so from this organization. I just wanted to check on you. What's happening? It's totally fine. In fact, customers love that. I got a call from the COO of the PEO that represents us, and he asked me, he's like, "How are you doing? Are you okay?" And he's probably going to take what I told him back to his company and use that as part of his, looking at how they're doing. And that's totally fine because my voice is being heard. And I think customers really appreciate that. All right. So now that you've gathered the information, you've brought it all together, now you need to start thinking about what you've learned and are there any trends? And this is where defining the problem comes in. And I'll let Amanda talk a little bit about defining the problem.
Sure. So the key point when you're defining the problem is to take what you learned in the research stage and start defining and exploring the problem or problems by piecing out any key trends that you discovered. There could be like one clear issue, there could be 5 clear issues, so you really need to start discovering what the issues are. And based on that, you really need to aim to answer a few questions. Will
Yeah.
solving this problem require different skills or resources? What are the costs? What are the deadlines? What are the limitations in time, money, and materials? So you really need to, figure out, how could you even go about solving this problem? Is it something that you can solve right now, or is it something that you might need to focus on in the future?
Absolutely. And then once you kind of have that idea, then you can start ideating. That's the fancy word for brainstorming. But I think honestly, brainstorming is a dirty word because people get in a room and then you have one person that with a really loud voice that is going to dominate the conversation, and then everybody else kind of does the group think thing, which is tough for people. So it's important to facilitate this well. Um, Ideation, when it's done well, helps you take abstract ideas and make them more tangible. And there's kind of a formula for this. The first thing you do is what was called divergent thinking. This is when every idea goes on the table. And now that you've got every idea on the table, then you start looking at what is possible. All right, so you don't want to start with what's possible first and then put the ideas out. You really want to get all the ideas out there, and they could be crazy. It could be like, oh yeah, we're going to send somebody to Mars. That may not be a reasonable thing right now, but maybe it won't be down the road. So don't lose that idea. Just to give you an example, there's a great documentary series on Netflix called Abstract. We've been watching it as a company, and there's an episode with Tinker Hatfield, one of the designers for Nike, and he was talking about the Nike shoe that the laces automatically like tie for you. It just kind of comes in, and it was based on this idea from, I think, 1987 in Back to the Future 2, when Michael J. Fox's shoes, he was in the year 2015 and the shoes automatically tied. And they looked back at that idea, 20 years later, and was like, you know what, maybe we could try this. And it turned into a product for them. So don't throw out those ideas. Every idea is on the table. So there's a couple of different techniques that we use at Standard Beagle, and I think that they're really appropriate for making sure that all voices are heard. And the first one is that mind mapping. And I think mind mapping actually works really well for people who are more like Amanda in terms of getting their ideas out. Do you think you could explain a little bit about what mind mapping is?
Yeah, sure. So mind mapping for me is starting with like one single idea and then kind of drawing off of that idea and connecting it with other ideas in your mind. So, it could start with something really broad with like food and what does food mean to you and what adjectives pop up with food and what's related to food, and it just really helps me explore like what the key issue is and things that are related to that issue.
Yeah, I like that. I like that method a lot because you can have everybody in the room, but you can start silently, and everybody's just working on a piece of paper. And that lets people kind of work on their own, get some ideas out without the fear that somebody else is looking at them, or maybe they're on the spot or something. So it really pulls out all the different types of contribution preferences in a group. Similarly on that is concept sketching, and you might do it the same way, where you are working as a group, but silently, and just kind of sketching out different concepts. You could all work together on a single drawing. You could work individually on a piece of paper. Kind of depends on how you're going to do it, but you're just kind of drawing. And again, saw this in that documentary with Tinker Hatfield. He just drew. He was just drawing ideas, and he would do it for hours. You don't need to spend hours, and you don't have to be someone who's an artist in order to do it. You can literally just sketch boxes, but it helps to get ideas from your brain out on the paper. And then finally, the third one that I want to bring up, there's multiple ways to do this, but this is my favorite one. And I use this a lot, is the sticky note session, where I'll come into a company and nobody that I'm talking to is a designer, and they're all a little bit nervous. And I give everybody a stack of Post-it notes and a Sharpie. And we talk through maybe some different prompts, and then their job is to put a separate idea on every single sticky note. And then they take all the sticky notes and they put it up on the wall. And nothing is off the table. In fact, when I see anybody ball up a sticky note, I know that they're already self-filtering, and we have a conversation about that. But they put all of their ideas up. And then what I do is I have another group come up, look at all the sticky notes, and then they will sort them. And they'll do a silent sorting technique so that no one voice dominates. And they move things around and group ideas together. You'd be surprised how much ideas from different people can overlap. And then finally, if we're in a situation where we need to choose something, we could come back to that convergent thinking. Then we do some dot voting. So I take, from Office Depot, they have the little colored sticky sticker or circle stickers, and everybody gets a certain number, and they can vote. They can put all 3 of their stickers on a single idea, or they can put it on 3 different ones. It's up to them. And you can see which ones resonate most with the group. Which one should we try? Does that mean it's going to work? No, that's not the point of this. The idea is, what do you start with first? Anything to add to that, Amanda?
No, I think you did a really great job of being sure that, you're bringing all ideas to the table and you're not ruling out anything because it might be too far-fetched. I mean, it's really important to get all ideas out here, even if maybe it's not the best solution straight away.
Absolutely. You'll figure it out when you have, done some rapid prototyping. And this is the 4th phase of design thinking. Take those ideas, decide which one you're going to be able to prototype. A prototype is anything that is real enough to be able to test. It could be like we mentioned earlier, a paper prototype, maybe just a sketch. If you can take it a little bit more tangible, that's even better. So you might have a developer on your team that can whip together a quick website, maybe to test out a concept. It doesn't have to be fully functioning, just enough to look like it. Or it could be just pictures that you place up to maybe look like it's a website. It might not be functioning at all, but it's enough to test. It doesn't even have to be a digital product. Um, it could be a service. You might prototype out like a new service that people could try. Maybe it's something like at a hotel where you have maybe a concierge product that's off to the side and you're designing a setup for that. Or maybe you're designing a new way to flow through a doctor's office and you prototype out like what the flow would be for patients to walk through. The ideas are limitless. Really, it's your imagination that comes into this and how you can prototype something that's different. Let's go back to the restaurant example. You know, these restaurants are literally prototyping on the fly in front of us. We can see it right now, right? Like they're trying out different types of takeout. They're trying out putting their products out for, you know, like HEB. They're trying out all sorts of things. We're literally witnessing prototyping right now. Is everything going to stick? No. Does that mean you have to do it for every single customer? No, but you can try it out and you can prototype a solution. What did I leave out?
I think it's really important to go into this with an iterative mindset. You're not going to find the perfect solution straight away. It might take a few tries. And that's why you're doing this, right? Because you need to fail fast and you need to fail often, because the whole point of this is finding the right solution for the problem, and that could take a little bit. So don't feel discouraged if something doesn't work. It's just part of the process. You know, you have to iterate until you get it right.
Absolutely. And you really need to think through the entire journey. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever you're prototyping, you need to think through what is the touch point going to be. That way you can prototype the entire piece. So it could just be coming to a website, but if it's a service, really think through how customers are going to be interacting with this prototype. And I like how it says, put yourself in the customer's shoes. That's really important. You can test it by putting yourself in their shoes and thinking as a customer would. But really, you know, it's the pedal to the metal when you actually put it in front of people. Now, does this mean you're going to test it in front of like every single person? No, but you do want to test it with some select customers and see if it's going to work. Not everything's going to work. And it's still a success if you find out it's going to fail. And the reason that it's a success is because you found out fast. You tried something new, you found out fast. And you're going to learn a lot just by failing. Failure is not a bad thing. Failure is just figuring it out quickly. And you might learn a lot just from that test, realize, oh, what if we iterated it just a little bit? And then that becomes something that is going to work. That's a success right there. You want to make sure that if you don't have customers that you can test it on, that you try it on, you know, at least someone that can give you some very refreshing feedback. The last thing you want is for someone to tell you, this is a great idea, and for you to be banking on that to roll it out to everybody, and then whoops, they were totally just trying to make you feel okay. That is so bad. So please find someone that is going to be honest with you about what you're trying to put out in front of them. Wouldn't you agree? Like, that's the worst thing.
Yeah, 100%. That's why you need to test with just more than one single person, because they could just be trying to make you happy. And if you spend a bunch of money and time and capital, or resources essentially, into making something work, and it's not a good idea and it totally flunks, I mean, that's a huge risk to your business.
So how many people would you suggest testing on?
I mean, I'd say like an absolute minimum of 6. And
Yeah.
I'd say 6 to 12 is like a good zone. But if you have the resources and the time, I mean, you can totally go beyond that.
Yeah, you can. And I like to say that test until the feedback you're getting is repetitive. If you keep hearing the same thing over and over again, you don't need to test anymore. right? Maybe you have to change the test, but like literally if you're finding over and over again that you're getting the same kind of responses and feedback, the test is good. You can move on. And it could be as few as 4 people, but 6 gives it I think 6 to 12 is a really good range as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea here though is practice. When you're rolling this out, sometimes there's going to be something that you can test it on that's small. When I typically give this presentation, I'm talking through like, test it on a company party, something that's low risk. At this stage, during the shelter in place and everything that's going on in the world, you don't have the luxury to wait until you get something that's super low risk. You can find something that's small though to try it on. Try this process, put it to work. The more you practice it, the more successful you're going to be at it. You're probably going to suck the first time you do it. That's why you need to practice, 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 right? All right. So that's all we have for today. Thank you so much. Again, my name is Cindy Brummer, and I'm joined by Amanda White. We're with Standard Beagle. We are a user experience design and development agency based in Austin, Texas. We would love your feedback on our online training. You can reach us at standardbeagle.com/feedback, or you can email us at info@standardbeagle.com. Any parting words, Amanda, before we go?
Have a wonderful day, everyone.